Thank you both for your testimony. Ms. Conley, in response to Mr. Wicker's question about why we didn't supply more weapons earlier, you used the term, it's almost like we self-deterred. So it sounds like you're saying we didn't provide weapons to Ukraine earlier because we're afraid it might provoke Vladimir Putin to invade.
Yes, that's what I meant.
That doesn't seem so smart anymore, I would submit. Let's look at what we can do now. Mr. Zakheim, you talked about providing intelligence to allow the Ukrainian army to strike Russian troops. Could come in a lot of different forms. It could be overhead intelligence. It could be signals intelligence. It could just be a Ukrainian who's working with Americans who says, I see Russian troops sleeping in the open. Where do you think the approval authority for sharing that intelligence with the Ukrainian army should rest? Should it be close to the Ukrainian army on the front lines, or should it be at, say, the White House?
When it comes to operational matters, I would generally recommend that you delegate that authority close as you can to the operational line.
One lesson of Iraq and Afghanistan is you don't want to have what we called the 5,000-mile screwdriver operating in the White House, right?
Yes, sir.
So you don't want lawyers and professors at the National Security Council making decisions about whether we can share actionable intelligence.
As a lawyer, I would agree with that.
You mentioned BP and Shell, their commendable decisions to withdraw from their Russian oil and gas efforts. Unfortunately, we have not taken the step of sanctioning Russian oil and gas exports. I think we should do that. But 2/3 of Russian oil ships by sea. Is there anything to stop, say, the shipping companies that are moving that oil or the insurance companies that are moving those ships from refusing to carry that oil anymore?
Senator, I'm sure their customers are what's motivating their decisions.
If you were advising their corporate executives and their board about the reputational risk that caused BP and Shell to make those decisions, might you encourage them to think about stopping carrying that oil?
Yes, Senator.
I think I would too. We're isolating Russia diplomatically, financially, economically, except in Vienna, where we're still sitting down with Russian diplomats to negotiate a dangerous nuclear deal with Iran. Mr. Zakheim, what kind of signal do you think that sends to Vladimir Putin about our seriousness to isolate him in the long run?
It's a mixed message that undermines what we're trying to accomplish in Ukraine and preserve peace in Europe.
I would agree. We also are trying to help Europe find ways to diversify its energy sources away from Russia. Do you think partners in the Persian Gulf, like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar and Kuwait, are enthusiastic about helping us solve that problem in Europe when we're negotiating with Iran to give them hundreds of billions of dollars to continue their reign of terror across the Middle East?
No, Senator, and to me, the notion that somehow we're going to rely on Iranian production to help us with energy needs fails to learn anything from the past, and specifically the immediate past in Russia.
Vladimir Putin in the past few days has engaged in nuclear saber rattling. It's not surprising. It's a playbook that the Russians have run for decades. In the weeks ahead, though, we will get a nuclear posture review from this administration. What kind of signal do you think it will send to Vladimir Putin at the time he's engaged in nuclear saber rattling if the nuclear posture review of the Biden administration reduces the investments in our nuclear modernization or some of the new weapon systems that we introduced in the last administration to deter Russia's nuclear forces?
Senator, I'm hopeful that the nuclear posture review will have a robust support policy as well as funding for the triad, as well as the type of new capabilities or reintroducing capabilities in terms of intermediate range missiles with nuclear capability. And I really hope that the Biden administration walks away from any inclination towards a no first use policy.
I'm very hopeful of that as well. We will see. We've talked a little bit about arming Ukraine on a crash emergency basis over the last few days, in some countries, last few weeks with others. Do you think we should take the lesson from this invasion of Ukraine that perhaps now is the time to substantially increase the arms that we are sending to Taiwan?
Absolutely, Senator. That is the clear takeaway from what happened in Ukraine. It's not a perfect analogy, but there's a lot to learn, including robust support for Taiwan.
Finally, Mr. Zakheim, I want to speak to you about a survey that the Reagan Institute recently conducted. I was dismayed to see there's been a double-digit collapse in the trust that Americans have in their military. It was at 70% You now register it at 45%. I know that decline has been happening for a few years. It's been somewhat gradual, though, until the last 12 months, where it seems to have substantially accelerated. What do you think are the reasons for that collapse in confidence and trust in our military, and what might be done about it?
Thank you, Senator. As you mentioned, the survey has shown this is a trend over a number of years, although it continued to decline substantially over the past year. When we asked respondents why, it tended to go to the politicization of the military, without explaining what that means. So we'll continue to work on that for the next survey. But I imagine it refers to civilian leadership and senior military leadership. When the respondents were asked to explain why they do have trust and confidence in the military, generally they talk about the troops, those in harm's way, those in the front lines.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Zakheim. It was an important study, and I do hope the Reagan Institute will continue to probe the very important question.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carton. Senator